So Bass and Aviola proposed 4 areas of transformational leadership. They call them the 4 I's. These areas include idealized influence. Leaders act as positive role models, are enthusiastic, and embody the group's values. They create high expectations through role modeling. Inspirational motivation. Leaders provide a clear vision, optimism, inclusion, and productivity. Through developing and sharing their vision, they stimulate respect and trust. Intellectual stimulation. Leaders present new ideas and approaches that challenge followers to grow. Leaders set goals and are innovative. And then finally, individualized consideration. Respect and responsibility is fostered through personal attention to followers. Leaders are mentors. And we are going to explore these 4 areas of transformational leadership. I am also going to put a PDF of this, and I'm sure Claire will send it out later, but in the chat. It was sent successfully. So if anything's too small on the screen, if you're able to pull it up on the PDF and follow along, you can do that. Transformational leaders are influential. One of my leader role models, Dr. Banda from the University of Zambia, said in a recent meeting, if you continue to try and lead where you have no control, you will waste your energy. But instead, lead where you have control, specifically in your interactions and thoughts, which will expand your influence. Think creatively. As a leader, it's essential to know where and how you can influence others. Stephen Covey illustrates this concept of influence using the circle of concern and the circle of control. He explains that we can be concerned about something like the weather, but we can't do anything to change it. We can, however, control our reactions and our emotions and act to change how we experience the situation. For example, you may be concerned that it's going to rain, but like I said, you can do nothing about it. What you do have control over is how you react. Will you be happy or upset? Will you bring an umbrella or take some other proactive precautions? Covey suggests that we should act within our circle of control and focus our energy there rather than in an area where we're concerned, because we have no real impact in those areas of concern. He explained that when we focus on our area of control and act within it, those actions radiate up into our circle of influence, which then impacts areas where we are concerned. So taking this home, as a parent, you might be worried about your child and who they will be when they grow up, but you have no control over the grown child. This is your circle of concern. What you do have control over right now is who you are as a parent, and this is your circle of control. How are you controlling your actions? How are you responding to your child and what they do? How are you being a role model to your child? And that influences your young child. So your circle of control, so what you're controlling, your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, impacts the circle of influence. And that in turn will have an impact on the grown child, which is your circle of concern. Now let's move into from the family into the workplace. As an anesthesiologist and as a clinician, you're likely concerned about the community's health, but that's a concern. You cannot change the health of your entire community. What you do have control over is your work and how you act in your work, your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, and what you say to other coworkers and your patients. That will have an impact on your patient's health. Then in turn, all those patients compounded together will impact the community's health. So when you act in your circle of control, your work, you're influencing your circle of influence, your patient's health, and then you're influencing the community's health more broadly. Okay, so let's apply that to you and do some self-reflection for a moment. Think about the concerns you have. Take a moment and write down those concerns. You may want to draw a circle and write your concerns in it. I'll give you a moment to maybe sketch something out next to you, type it on your phone or something like that. Write out your concerns. We'll use this in just a moment in small group activities. So write out your concerns. Here I have some pictures of concerns you might have. You might be concerned about the university or your city, or of course your government and situations that are happening. each concern in your circle and decide if it's something you can control. Move those things that you can control into an inner circle labeled control. This inner circle represents the problems, challenges, and opportunities that we have direct control over, such as our own research, work, and house. Problems we have control over involve our own behavior, our actions, and our attitude. Now consider what you have indirect control or influence over. Maybe it's your children, patients, or students. We can influence our neighborhood, church, and work environment, friends and colleagues and family. We can influence them, but we cannot control them. So those go into the influence category. And then finally, all those other concerns that we had listed that aren't in our control and that aren't in our influence are truly concerns, and they fall into the outer circle. So things, as I mentioned, weather, politics, and policies, those things fall far outside our personal reach. So think about this. In which circle do you spend most of your mental energies? Which circle is the source of many of your worries and conversations? By determining which of these circles is the focus of most of your time and energy, you can discover much about your degree of proactivity. So when we focus on things in our circle of concern, they push in on us, sometimes affecting our emotional and mental states. And our circle of influence decreases because energy is focused on things we cannot directly change. We often simply react to things since we can't change or influence that circle. We discussed reactive actions and thoughts last session. And on the contrary, when we are proactive and focus on our circle of influence, that circle incrementally grows, pushing out into our circle of concern. So now we'll have time for some small group activities. So Claire, Dr. Bond, I think we can maybe have 2 or 3 small groups. And I want you to, in those groups, consider these questions. In what ways do you so think about your circle of influence. Think about that area of influence. In what ways do you currently influence that circle? And how can you increase your focus and leadership in that circle? So hopefully everyone wrote down, if you haven't already, maybe you're quickly jotting them down. Where's your control, your influence, and your concern? Think about those circles. Jot down a few things. And then we will go into small groups. And I'm trying to copy this. I'll put these questions in the chat box so remember them. But essentially, you're talking about your areas of influence with your group. To talk, another focus on transformational leaders is that they consider the individuals. And as you think about the ways that you have influence, you likely come into conflict with people from time to time. Okay, so in the first mode, the competing style, they're assertive. People with this are assertive and uncooperative. Their goal is to win, and you can expect an unwillingness to negotiate with others' opinions. As we go through these, think about how you've reacted to situations and how other people who are in your teams or that you've worked with in your families or community react to different situations. Then there's the collaborating style, has assertive and cooperative, and this style consists of thoughtful consideration of each party's views, including a discussion of goals, resulting in mutual understanding and an expanded range of possible outcomes. Then there's the avoiding style, which is unassertive and uncooperative, and individuals often withdraw, delay, or refuse to address the conflict. In the accommodating style, people are unassertive, but they're at least cooperative. The result is submission of one party by acknowledging and accepting the other side of the issue. And then in the middle, there's the compromising style, and this is moderately assertive and moderately cooperative. It gives neither party everything they desire, but both parties receive enough to at least leave satisfied. So let's consider a few examples to illustrate these points. So I will share a few scenarios, and I'd like you to either pop in the chat, so I need to find the chat box, or just unmute and say what side you, which type of conflict, which mode you think is best appropriate. So if you need insights from different perspectives, which mode of communication would be most effective? Need insight from different perspectives.
Collaborating.
Yes, collaborating, because there you are going to expand your range of possible outcomes. You're looking for a win-win solution. What if you have no chance of getting what you want? What would be the best option there?
Avoiding.
Yes, avoiding. Can't get what you want. Yeah, head out. What about to limit damage of continued conflict? You want to limit the damage that's going to happen. It's sometimes
Compromising.
You can compromise, yes. Accommodating also works, and just yielding and stepping back. What about if both sets of concerns are too important to be compromised? So both sides are, yes, collaborating. If it's really important that both sides and both concerns are addressed, sometimes you might need to expand that range of ideas and possible outcomes. And that can be true sometimes for long-term major issues. Sometimes you need to collaborate there instead of really compromise. What about trivial issues? If it's just a trivial thing you're in conflict over.
Accommodating.
Be accommodating, yeah. Backing out, or sometimes just avoiding it if it's going to be a true conflict and it's just a trivial small thing. What about the issue is much more important to the other side than it is to you?
Compromising.
Compromising, yeah. And if you really don't care and don't have a stake in it, accommodating can be really good too. And that's also a way that you can bank favors with people. Sometimes you might need to step back, let them have their way so that in the future they may potentially do the same to you. And let's go back to our case study. When you're working as a consultant and you had that anesthesia in-room provider who disagreed with your plan and suggested a different plan, what might you do there now that you're thinking about these different ways? And on this slide, it is a summary of those scenarios plus a few extra. And you have the PowerPoint now, and Claire will send it out later too, so you can review some of them. So moving forward, transformational leaders provide intellectual stimulation. This may come in the form of new approaches to processes and other change measures for quality improvements as needed. John Kotter is famous for his 8-step change model. And the 8 steps are grouped into 3 phases: create a climate for change, make the change happen, and sustain the change. In the first phase, the leader sets the stage for change by creating a sense of urgency towards change. This is often done by sharing evidence or a compelling story about why change is needed. The leader should build a guiding coalition and form a strategic vision that includes what a better future looks like with the change. Then, to make change happen, the leader shares the compelling vision and reason to change in order to motivate people and to build a team that will implement the change. Often, the leader may need to remove barriers for the team to work. And it's helpful and motivating to recognize short-term wins as the change is begun. Finally, the leader should build a sustainability plan so that changes are institutionalized. And so before I became familiar with these steps, I would often try to implement change, whether in my classroom, the office, or with my family, without being clear about the vision or why change was important. And that's a basic first step that we often overlook, since the reason for change is many times obvious to us, but we fail to realize that others don't see it in the same way. So make sure to remember to create that sense of urgency, share that vision around. I've often found that it's important to get buy-in from small groups who can champion my message. That's another tip in change management. And then finally, I have found it incredibly helpful to celebrate small wins. Even though you may be far from that final goal, it's important to celebrate these small wins to motivate people. And a friend of mine calls these micro affirmations. Giving small affirmations to the team when they're on the right path to achieving the goal can motivate them to continue onward and helps them to know that their actions are noticed and important. And so there are many inputs needed to implement complex change. Change comes when vision, skills, incentives, resources, and an action plan are aligned and support one another and the team members. Without any one of those elements, confusion, anxiety, resistance, frustration, or false starts may take place of the change. So think about what changes are you implementing or have implemented in the past or hope to implement, like your residency programs. Um, and what elements have you found to be most beneficial? Or looking back on some of those, where have you lacked some of these elements and what were those outcomes?